What's going on, everybody? So Diablo 4 just dropped the update live stream yesterday, and they went over a lot of things that honestly we already knew, but also I guess you could say a little bit more explicitly on specifically what we're going to be doing in terms of the end game and some unique mechanics within the game. So I want to give you guys a brief summary while we're going through this video, but also give you guys my feedback on what I saw. Fortunately, I couldn't do this live because I was busy. However, we're gonna go through the video and talk on a couple of points. So first thing I want to say was I really enjoyed the update live stream. To be honest, I thought it was just enjoyable to listen to all these guys talk. I really thought Riker was a really good fit for the cast. But first thing they dove into was honestly Riker's experience and the fact that he got to play a lot of endgame type builds and got to experience the endgame a lot, which is really, really interesting to me. And they dove into the world tiers and how you're going to be unlocking these. This is not something new, but Riker did mention that it is far more difficult in the capstone dungeon to unlock world tier 3. We already knew that the capstone dungeon was difficult, and we already knew that's how you unlocked tier 3, but Riker here was saying that it was way harder than he thought. And I'm gonna have to agree with that. Next thing they kind of talked about was the items. Specifically, Joe dove into kind of the sacred / ancestral items and how basically these are the two new item tiers. We already knew that this was gonna happen. However, here's where it's really, really interesting. And again, this is part of sort of the breaking open the end game. So the two tiers, World Tier 3 goes from 50 to 70 in terms of levels. World Tier 4 goes from 70 to 100, as far as I understand. The key is when you get into these world tiers, you actually drop loot at any level in that category. So if you drop a level 70 weapon and you're level 51, you can wield that level 70 weapon at level 51. This is huge. Now I knew that loot scaled based on world tier difficulty, not necessarily your level. But what I didn't know was the fact that you could drop potentially way higher level loot than you were able to in the 1 to 50 process. Because if you're at world tier 1 or 2, the only loot that you could drop in terms of leveling is the level loot equal to your level or below, unless you fight a monster that's way higher level. It'll drop that loot according to that monster's level or below. And so this is a really, really interesting idea and really changes up the end game, especially for casual players, because casual players can load up, play a World Tier 3 difficulty, and then potentially get a lot of end game pieces for your build scrolling through. You don't have to necessarily go through and specifically target farm. You just kind of enjoy the game and you can potentially get way stronger. This is really, really cool. I really like this. It gives a little bit more excitement to farming or just playing dungeons when you get to that next tier, and it's going to be a rush of dopamine for sure. So I'm really excited about that. They also talked about a little bit more of the new legendary and unique items as shown here. These are some examples that they showed, which was pretty cool. Honestly, most of these things I've already seen. Some of these are too I guess you could say too interesting. I shouldn't say I haven't seen the specific aspects, but I've seen similar type things here with these legendary items. So honestly, not super insane, but definitely cool to see some additional legendary aspects, and how more legendary powers will appear at World Tier 3 is also what they mentioned, which we kind of already knew. Now here's where it gets really interesting, and this is where we really start to dive into the end game as I skip over here. So right behind me here, you guys can see that there is, let me see if I can find a better image of this. So they're going to enter the Helltide dungeon, or the Helltide event in the open world. And what this is essentially an open world event that's timed for about an hour. And this is an end game event. So one of the questions I had was that, are open world events going to be end game viable, or are we going to spend 90-95% of our time in nightmare dungeons, similar to how we spend 90-95% of our time in greater rifts in Diablo 3? And it looks like that is not going to be the case. World bosses and open world events seem to be huge portions of the end game. and this is a pure confirmation of that. So now this event is only available in the Nightmare difficulty or above, which means you have to be minimum level 50. So that's when the end game starts to kind of show itself with the Nightmare dungeons and this event here. But basically you're going to kill enemies within this zone. You're going to get something called a cinder, and then you can open these caches as shown on screen, and you will actually be able to target farm specific spots or specific gear pieces. For example, specific boots, or if you want just boots, you can open up a cache that's just boots, but you need to earn all these cinders within the event at that time. If you die, you lose half of them. If you leave the event or the event ends, you will lose all of them and you will not be able to kind of carry them over to the next event. This is really cool because some people were worried about specific legendaries that they might want to find. This is a great way to target farm specific builds or pieces for specific builds, which again, I believe will be a core component of the end game. So I'm really excited about that. And I think that this is going to be an absolutely amazing sort of engaging event, especially considering you're going to see other players around in this event. Hopefully that is considered and it works quite well. Then they talked about Nightmare sigils or Nightmare dungeons and sigils. Let me see if I could pull up the image here. And they really just spoke about how you're going to go into a Nightmare dungeon and you're going to use a sigil and you're going to get all those different affixes, which we kind of already knew. But one important thing is that they mentioned how you can actually salvage the sigils and create more new random sigils. Now, I actually thought this was in, but I didn't remember if it was confirmed. So I'm not sure if this was confirmed, but this is pretty cool that you can go ahead and craft new ones. And this is the replayable Nightmare Dungeon sigil, Nightmare Dungeons and Sigils, rather. And you can see they scale up. For example, you have tier 3, then you have tier 17, tier 29. I believe these go up to tier 100. And you can see the different tiers. The middle one and the left one require world tier 3, but the right one requires world tier 4. And you can see it gets a lot harder. For example, you can only have 4 revives on the far right. You can see it does have a little bit of extra affixes compared to the first one and second one. So as you go up in the tiers, I imagine more and more affixes are going to be basically applied. And they also mentioned how the seasons are going to only have a certain amount of dungeons that are Nightmare dungeon viable. So it's going to rotate, and that way you don't have to do all the dungeons in the game, but you do have to make sure that you're getting the right Nightmare sigils for the specific dungeons. That way people can go ahead and get familiar with a few dungeon lineups, and you can just run those. Pretty interesting, and I like the way this is kind of going in towards the end game. I'm pretty excited about that. Now here is my favorite system in the game, arguably. It's actually the Paragon Board. And I actually I did an in-depth video on this, and people just didn't understand what the Paragon Board does. But I think this is the coolest part of what they were talking about. They gave us a little bit more information about this. So right here we have the Paragon Board, and you notice the little gray slots are typically going to be your plain old stats. And I'm going to swap myself over here. So typically the gray orbs or gray circles are going to be the plain old stats. The blue ones are going to be a little bit more interesting stats. Yellow ones are going to be the rare affixes that are going to give you actually specific bonuses. And then you have the orange ones, which are the legendary bonuses. But more importantly, and this is my favorite part, you can see here, you have the sockets, and you can actually slot a glyph in there. And you can see that they give you stat enhancements or specific bonuses based on your unlock radius, etc. As you upgrade this glyph, you actually can go ahead and get insane bonuses. And you can see here, you can even get crazy bonuses like plus 50% bonus to all rare nodes within range. 10% increased damage for 4 seconds after using a defensive skill. These are big bonuses and huge to determining your build. I think the Paragon Board system is going to be really cool with the glyphs in it. And again, for those people that are just saying, yeah, plus 5 stats, that's it. I mean, every single game has some connecting nodes, and those are what those nodes are. It looks like the Paragon Board system also is going to be mainly focused on kind of min-maxing your 1 to 2 boards rather than going for all the boards, because what they basically said is that the cost scales really high as you get more boards. So the goal isn't just to streamline straight to the next Paragon Board. The idea is to kind of reinforce that you want to min-max the glyphs and get the specific layout that you actually want, which I think is way cooler and way more interesting than just rushing all the different Paragon boards. So very excited about that. Lastly, which I don't really necessarily want to talk about too much, they kind of went over the post beta changes that they made and some of the Q&A that they addressed. So a couple things that I want to mention really quickly here. They talked about how long will it take to get to the battle pass. And they mentioned that basically they have a couple of quests. I don't think they mentioned a specific time allotment, so they didn't really answer that as far as I remember. But I do remember them saying it should take about 80 hours to finish the battle pass in a previous interview with Rod. So that question was answered previously. They also talked about WASD movement, how they're not going to add that, some co-op features, as well as a few other options. And most importantly, guys, which many of you already know, a brand new beta on May 12th. So this is going to be a level 20 beta, which unfortunately isn't as good because you can't get access to ultimate skills, for example, and a lot more points, and you're still going to be in the same zone. However, if you get level 20 and you beat Shava, the world boss, then you're going to get a unique cosmetic called a mount trophy, where it basically is a trophy on your mount that you just walk around with. It's kind of like a mount skin, kind of, but it's more like a mount accessory, I guess. You're going to want to reach level 20, beat Ashava, which is on the second day, and it's going to repeat every 3 hours. This is from May 12th to the 14th. And so from what they said 48 hours of playtime, however that lines up. And they also mentioned that they're mainly doing this to stress test the servers. So, you know, when we dive in here, they basically said this is going to be the final iteration or the global launch version of Diablo 4. So this is what we can expect to have when the game launches. So don't expect anything too different. And they want to make sure that this build is able to be pretty proficient in getting everyone into the game when the game launches. So pretty excited about that and expect a ton of videos suggesting a couple of fun builds to try out in the beta and etc. If you guys want to follow that, I'll be playing the beta obviously as I did previously. Probably will stream it, we'll see though. I'm probably not going to play as hard because I don't find it as interesting to go to level 25, and it's almost like a tease because I've played the level 25 process and I really enjoyed it, and I know I'm gonna really enjoy this beta, and I'm gonna be sad again because I can't play the game. So stay tuned for the Diablo 4's Ruined Gaming Part 2 video because you know it's gonna happen. So that's gonna wrap it up, guys. Let me know what you thought about this whole live stream if you guys did watch it. If you guys have any comments, questions, concerns about anything that I kind of mentioned, the things that I enjoy about this, let me know in the comments section down below. And I'm really interested in how they're shaking up the end game, because again, I was firmly a believer based on what we've seen that the open world was not going to matter too much and that the focus was going to be nightmare dungeons, but it seems like they're really trying to encourage the open world, which can be a very good thing or a very bad thing depending on who you ask. So for me, it's a good thing. For some other people, it will be a bad thing. It really depends on, you know, what you enjoy. So that's gonna be it, and I'll see you all for the next video.